This is integrating HMH into reading with Google Classroom. It's part of the Columbus City Schools Technology Integration Day on August 26th, 2020. Just a quick little bit about me. My name is Rachel Concitis. I am a third grade teacher at Winterset Elementary School. I've included my school email in case you would like to email me and reach out if you have any questions. I am a level 1 and level 2 certified educator through Google for Education. So today's agenda, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating a plan and adding assignments in HMH Ed, followed by pushing those assignments to Google Classroom so that your students can access them when they are at home. I will show you the process first through some screenshots, and then I will go back and show you that full process live so you can see me walking through the whole thing. You will get a link to these slides at the end of the presentation, so don't feel that you need to write tons of notes down. I will give you a link at the end, and you can make a copy of this whole slideshow and keep it and look back at it as long as you or as often as you need to. So real quick before we get started, what is HMH Into Reading? HMH Into Reading is the district's newly adopted reading and writing curriculum program for kindergarten through 5th grade. It does have a digital component to it. Now, students and teachers can access that digital component through the Clever extension. Students and teachers access the digital versions of their materials. Students can submit their assignments through Ed, and teachers can grade them there. HMH Into Reading is the actual content that the students learn with. Now, what is Google Classroom? Google Classroom is how we are pushing the content and assignments to the students this year, since at least for the first 9 weeks, we'll all be learning remotely. Students and teachers can access it through Clever or by bookmarking the direct link to Google Classroom. It allows you to share videos, links, assignments, and feedback with the students. The students can complete their assignments through Classroom and check their grades. Google Classroom is how the students are accessing the content and the assignments. So step one, after you watch this tutorial, is that you're going to need to make sure that you have your Google Classroom already created. If you've never used Google Classroom before and you want a short tutorial on how to make one, there is a link in my slides to a Google Classroom 101 presentation. The last slide of that one has some helpful links to learn more about Google Classroom, and I've also copied those links in this presentation. There are also tons of helpful video tutorials on YouTube and also at the Google for Education website. If you just Google it, you'll probably find some. So the second step that you'll need to do is to make sure that you can log into Ed, Your Friend, and Learning. This is the HMH Into Reading online access portal. This is what the icon looks like in Clever. I believe yesterday you guys had a half-day PD on HMH Into Reading, so hopefully everyone has already gotten logged into Ed. So just as what I hope is a refresher, when you first log in to Ed, you will land at your dashboard page. And this is just an example of what my dashboard page looks like. Now, the first time you log into Ed, you're going to need to manage your classes so that you can access the correct grade material and you can assign it to the students that are on your Infinite Campus roster. Now, to do that, you need to click on your name up at the top right corner. There's a little upside down caret. Once you do that, you need to select Manage Programs. And then you're going to scroll down through the math programs and the Into Literature and finally into Reading so that you can find the correct grade of HMH Into Reading and select your reading class from your Infinite Campus roster. Then you're going to scroll down again and repeat this step for the HMH Into Reading writing workshop for your grade. If you are a kindergarten teacher, you don't have a writing workshop as a separate component because it's all wrapped into your reading. Then you're also going to repeat this step for the HMH Rigby level readers. Now, you want to make sure that you click save before you go anywhere. Otherwise, you'll have to do all those steps again. All right, so now we're going to look at how you start to gather your materials in Ed so that you can push them to your students and assign them to your students. Now, the first thing you need to do is create a plan. So from your dashboard or wherever you're at, you need to click the Create tab at the top of your screen. Then over on the right, you're going to click Create Plan. Now, you can name the plan whatever you want. Don't forget to save. I have found it helpful to name them kind of based on what part of the reading series that we're doing. So I have started creating my plans with like module 1 and the name of the module and then which week it is, just for easy naming, because once I've done the work to create all my plans, I can reuse these year after year. Now we're going to add some material to your plan. Back at that dashboard, those 5 tabs up at the top, you're going to select Discover up along the top. Then you're going to select the module that you are going to pull content from. It's the beginning of the year, so I'm still pulling together content for the first module, which in 3rd grade is called What a Character. Then when you go into that module, it's going to separate things by the week. So I'm working on pulling things together for week 1. Then I'm going to select which lesson that I'm currently working from. And over on the right, I'm going to click on the View Resources. So I'm pulling together content for lesson 1 of week 1. Now, Ed has a whole lot of stuff there for you, and it can be really hard to find what you're looking for. The filter feature is going to be your friend. Practice filtering things. So I know that I'm looking for the teacher's guide, first of all. So I'm going to filter the audience to the teacher, and then I'm going to filter the component to the teacher's guide. Now, a quick tip. The online teacher's guides have hyperlinks to each item that has a digital component. So if you make sure to add the teacher's guide to your plan, it's going to make it really easy for you to find what you need when you're teaching live, because you can just go into that plan, you can go into the teacher's guide and click on the hyperlink really quickly. So it'd probably be helpful if you added the teacher's guide each time you make a plan. Now, to add it to your plan, you're just going to select that little button, Add to Plan. If you want to open it first and make sure that it's the right page that you want to add, go ahead and do that. Then it's going to give you the option to select which plan you want to add it to. Once you've started creating more plans, obviously you're going to have multiple plans that you could choose. I'm still working on week 1, so I'm going to click my module 1, week 1, and then I'm going to click Add when I am done. So this is an example of what the online teacher's guide looks like. And you'll notice that there are blue words with lines underneath. Those are called hyperlinks. And when you pull up the digital teacher's guide, clicking on that hyperlink will take you directly to that item. So if you need quick access to the item while you're teaching, this is why it's helpful to have that teacher's guide already part of your plan. All right, so now we're going to start adding other pieces and parts to our week's plan. I've already added the teacher's guide pages for that week. I'm going to go back to the Discover page and I'm going to change my filters to Student, because I'm going to start looking for the pieces and the parts that I'm going to want to assign to the students and some of the things that I'm going to want to push to them for Google Classroom. So I'm going to change my filter from the audience being the teacher to now being the student. And if I already know which exact component that I'm looking for, you can even filter by the components, just so you don't have as many pages of items that are coming up. So for this example, I'm filtering down to the Get Curious video for that first week. After you find the item that you want to add to your plan, go ahead and select Add to Plan. Now, if you want to watch it first, you can click Open and you can actually watch it. But make sure that you assign it to your plan. You're going to select which plan you're adding it to. This is the Get Curious video for that first week. So I selected week 1. Make sure you click Add, and then you're going to go back to Discover, and you're going to keep adding the other parts of the lesson to your plan. I'm going to keep doing this until I have all of the parts tagged into my plan or added to my plan before I do any steps of assigning work to students. I'm going to gather all of my resources before I start assigning. Now, one thing that you can do that's going to make work a lot easier, you can share your created plan with other teachers in CCS. So a great way that you can lighten your workload is to get with some other teachers that share the same grade level and split up those different modules. You could each create a smaller fraction of the plans and then share them with each other. Sometimes we don't have a grade level partner at our school, especially if you departmentalize. So if that's the case, you can find a grade level teacher that's at another school and collaborate. My big philosophy is to work smarter, not harder. Now, once you've added all of the parts of your plan, you're going to select Create back at the top to get back to your plan. And it's going to list all of the different components and parts that you have added to that week's plan. Now it's time to start assigning the different parts to the students and then sharing them to Google Classroom. When you click Assign to the students, it will push those components to the students that they need to access. They will get that access through their Ed account when they log in. Assignments that they have are going to show up on their dashboard. So in week 1, lesson 1, the first piece that I'm going to push to my students is this Get Curious video titled Calamity Jane. So I'm going to select that Assign button. Now, information about this creating the assignment is going to come up. Remember, this is still creating an assignment through Ed. We have not gotten to Google Classroom yet. You can change the name of the assignment to whatever you want. You can select the due dates. You can change the start date. You can change the due date. Make sure that you select the correct class from your Infinite Campus roster. If you have more than one reading class, especially those that departmentalize like I do, you're going to want to make sure that you assign it to both of your classes. If you need to add any extra directions to the students, you can go ahead and do that in the directions. Then don't forget to click Assign at the bottom of that little box. Now, you want to make sure that you assign all of the pieces and parts through Ed to the students that you want them to have access to. Not all pieces and parts of the lesson can be directly pushed to Google Classroom. So you might be asking, what parts of HMH Into Reading can be pushed directly to Google Classroom? And looking through kind of the first module of things, I've discovered that anything from the student's My Book can be pushed directly to Google Classroom. Those tabletop mini lessons can be pushed directly to Google Classroom. All of the anchor charts can be pushed directly to Google Classroom. The writing workshop focal text, those stories, can be pushed. And the Rigby Readers leveled library books can be pushed directly to students through Google Classroom. Now, some of the resources that we have are PDFs. And I know if we were in person, I believe the idea would be that we could display this up on the smartboard and it would be part of our whole classroom discussion. We're not in the classes right now, or the classrooms right now. And I still, there might be a piece or a page that would be beneficial for the students to be able to see later. Or maybe I want to have students that weren't able to join us for our live Zoom call still be able to access those pages. A lot of them are saved as PDFs. So when you pull them up in Ed, it's going to pull it up as a PDF. Now, some of those PDFs get to be pretty long because they're like 30 or 40 pages. I don't want to share that entire 40-page PDF to my students when I only want them to see what's on page 5. So one trick is that you can pull up the PDF, you can select print, and then select to print only the page that you want. Now, instead of actually printing it to a printer, you can change it to save it as a PDF. That's going to change the file. It'll create a new file. You won't lose anything that only has that selected page. Once you have that selected page, and you can name that file whatever you want so you remember how to find it, you can upload that single page PDF into Google Classroom as part of the week's assignments. That way the students could access that single PDF whenever they need to, and it would be pretty easy for them. So that's one hack that I've figured out of how to get around not being able to assign certain parts in the Ed Into Reading to the students through Google Classroom. I've also noticed that you can't assign a direct link to the videos to the students in Google Classroom. So you just would need to assign it to the students in Ed, and then you can kind of make an assignment in Google Classroom telling them to go watch it. They would just have to access the link through Ed, not through Google Classroom. Now, how do I push that HMH content from Ed into Google Classroom? You've gone through, you've gathered all the pieces and parts, and you've put them into the plan. So you have all of the different parts that you'll need that whole week. You've gone through and you've assigned the different parts to your classes, so they'll show up in their assignments on the day that you want it to. They have the due date that you want it to. Now, let's get those assignments into Google Classroom so the students can see what they need to do. Go to your plan and select Open for the part that you want to share with Google Classroom. So I remember that I can't share that Get Curious video about Calamity Jane, so I'm going to skip that one. But I know that I can directly share or push my book readings, the story selections, into Google Classroom. So in 3rd grade, the first story that we read is called Zach Jumps In. So I'm going to push that Open button next to Zach Jumps In. Now, up in the top right, any place that you can push something directly to Google Classroom, you're going to see those 3 dots, the traffic light, the hamburger, whatever you want to call them, in the top right corner. At the bottom of that drop-down menu, you're going to select Share to Google Classroom. Now, this next part is going to look familiar if you have made assignments in Google Classroom, or if you have pushed things to Google Classroom from like ReadWorks or other websites like that. You're going to select which classroom you want to share this with. If you have more than one class, you can select multiple classes at a later step. So for just this part, you'll need to pick just one class. So after you select your class, you will select Create Assignment under the Choose option drop-down menu. Then this is going to look pretty familiar if you've made an assignment in Google Classroom before. You can create the assignment. It's going to look like it normally does when you create classroom assignments. If you want to share this with multiple classes, this is where you're going to be able to do that. Over on the right side where it says For, there is a drop-down menu, and you can select as many classes as you need to push it to. Now, the one trick with this is that you can't schedule assignments to multiple classes. Google does not let you do that yet. So if you are going to schedule this assignment, you're going to want to do one class and schedule it, and then go back into Classroom and reuse that post to schedule it to your second one. So it does add a second step if you have more than one class or section that you need to schedule it to. If you're posting it right away, and you want the students to be able to access it immediately, then you can go ahead and assign it to as many classes as you need. So I know we've all been thinking about how to organize our classwork within the Classwork tab of Google Classroom. How do we best organize those assignments so that students and their parents can navigate what they have to do, what's due, what they've already completed, or what items are still to be completed? So you might consider organizing the topics by the day or the week so that students and parents can easily see what is being assigned to them right now. I know in the past I have done my topics more by content or type of assignment. I haven't done them by date, but this year I'm going to switch to grouping them by week. And a lot of best practice podcasts that I've watched and listened to about remote learning says that this method of organization is the easiest for students and parents that are already stressed with remote learning. So if you weren't thinking about assigning them by dates, grouping your topics by calendar date, you might want to think about that. Once you assign things to a particular topic, you can always move the individual assignments up and down so that they appear in the order that the students will complete them in. So in this example, I've created a weekly to-do list, which I assigned as a material. It's not actually an assignment. And that I'm going to keep at the top of this week's topic. That way I can include any assignments that require students to navigate to Ed to complete. Maybe I'm going to have them watch a video or complete an assessment, two things that can't be pushed directly to Google Classroom. So that to-do list will help students and parents be able to say, oh, yes, I've done this. Okay, I did this before Monday's class. That's not due till Thursday. Just kind of help them stay organized. Now, another tip, if you haven't already discovered this, you might think about changing the settings of your classroom so that classwork notifications don't show up on the stream. If you've had a classroom before and you didn't do this step, you notice that the stream gets so cluttered by every time you post a new assignment, it also shows up on the stream. Then announcements that you have get lost in the shuffle and students can't find them. If you turn off notifications of classwork on the stream, which the setting that you want to select is hide notifications, the announcements aren't going to get lost in the clutter of all those assignment posts. You can train your students to look at the stream for announcements and train them to look at the Classwork tab for their classwork. You might also think about changing the settings of your classroom so that students can only comment on the stream and they can't post. You can always turn it back off after they've modeled good digital citizenship. Maybe down the road, you want to change it so that students can post and comment on the stream. But at least at the beginning, you might think about turning off student posting and only allowing them to comment. We do want our children to develop good digital citizenship, and our Google Classroom is still our classroom for the year. Now, when you're pushing content to the students through Google Classroom, they will still need to complete those assignments through the HMH Ed portal. They will access the link to get to the assignment through Google Classroom, and then they complete the assignment through Ed. You will need to go through Ed to grade those assignments. You can access the completed assignments to grade through your dashboard at the bottom of your login screen in Ed. So you want to think Ed is the actual content of the HMH Into Reading. Google Classroom is how I'm going to push that content to the kids and how they're going to access the link of completing their assignment. They go together. Now, you might ask, what does this look like in real time? So now I'm going to show you. All right, so I am at my dashboard of Ed. I'm going to go up here to where it says welcome, and I'm going to select manage programs. Now we don't have into math. We don't need to worry about that. We don't have into literature because we're not middle school teachers. And we're down here to the elementary. You want to find your grade, and then you want to click the reading class that's associated with that you're teaching reading to. I departmentalize, so I have 2 reading classes. If you're self-contained, you're only going to have 1 reading class because you only have 1 reading class in Infinite Campus. After you do the Into Reading, you're going to go down and find your grade level of the writing workshop. And again, you're going to associate your class to writing workshop. And then you're going to find your grade of the Rigby leveled library readers. Now, once you're done, make sure you click Save up there. After that, we're going to go and create some plans. So you'll click this Create up at the top. If you haven't created a plan before, you're going to click Create Plan. You can name the plan whatever you want. At first I thought, oh, well, I'll just start naming them by the dates that I plan to teach this week. But then I got to thinking that if the dates are changing every year. And if I create a plan this year and I take the time to add all the material to it, I want my naming convention to be something that I can easily find it next year when I go back to teach the same content. So I decided to name them based on what module it is and the name of it, and then which week it is. Make sure you click Save. Now that you have your plan created, you can start to pull the content. So now you're going to go over to Discover, and you're going to make sure, or you're going to go to whatever module you're working on. I'm working on Module 1, I'm working on Week 1, and I'm actually working on Lesson 1. Now, a whole bunch of things are going to show up, and you're going to get overwhelmed with all of these pieces and parts, and you probably aren't going to want to put all of those into your plan. Use your filter. Think about what pieces and parts you're going to be looking for. First, I'm going to find the teacher's guide. So I'm going to filter down to the teacher, and I'm going to filter down to the teacher's guide. After I do that, a lot fewer things show up. So I am going to go over here and I'm going to push my pages about when we first introduced this topic. I'm going to add that to my plan. I'm going to select which plan I want to add it to and click Add. Now I'm going to go back and start adding the pieces and parts that I want to push to the students. So I'm going to change my audience. From teacher, now I'm going to filter down to the student. Now, I know in looking through the teacher's guide and looking through the lessons that the first thing I'm going to want to make sure I assign to them is the Get Curious video. So I actually know what component I'm looking for, so I can select that. So I found the Get Curious video for Calamity Jane. If I wanted to open it, I could go ahead and click Open It. I could watch it and preview it. Notice, though, this doesn't have the drop-down menu to assign it directly to Classroom, which is frustrating. All right, so I'm going to add it to my plan. I'm going to select which week I want to add it to and make sure I click Add. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to find different parts of the students that I want. After I have my students watch the Get Curious video when we're on a class call or before class, then we're going to get into their My Book. So I'm going to filter down to the component of the My Book. In that first week, the story that we read is Zach Jumps In. If I want to open it, and preview it, I can. Make sure it's the right story that we're looking for. But for now, I'm just going to add it to my plan. Then let's see. There's also an anchor chart that I want to share with the kids that week. So there's a point of view anchor chart that we're going to be using when we talk about some things in class. And this is something that I want them to have access to later that they might pull up when they're at home and we're not on a class call anymore. So I'm going to make sure I add this to my plan so that I can assign it to the kids. Anchor charts are something that you can push directly to Google Classroom. So I'm going to make sure that I share that with them. And then I also want to make sure I add this other anchor chart for the week. All right, so I have added a few things to my plan. If I go back to create, I can access all of my plans. See here, I see the 5 things that I've already added to my plan. Now, the teacher's guide, that's not something that I'm going to assign students. That's just there for me to remember where it is that I can pull it up. The Get Curious video with Calamity Jane. You know, I might consider flipping the classroom a little bit and having them watch that video before we get on our class Zoom call, so we're not all sitting there watching a video together when we could be having a discussion. Work smarter, not harder. So I'm going to make sure that I assign that to my students. Now, I like the assignment name that they pre-populate it with. I think it is a good name for my students. I think they'll understand what it is. But I'm going to change the start date so that it aligns with when I want them to have access to it. So, you know, maybe I'll give access to them the weekend before class. I don't know when they're going to be getting on their computers. But we're going to be talking about it on the 14th. So I want to make sure that they've done it before then. They have that due date. So please watch this video before our Monday morning Zoom call. Then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to assign it to my reading classes. And I'm going to assign it to the students. So now when the students log in after that assigned date, that'll show up in their assignments. They're not going to see it right now because it's kind of scheduled for later. All right, I'm going to go down. I'm going to assign the story to the kids. Maybe I'll have that for the whole week. And I'm going to make sure that I add it to my reading classes, and I'm going to assign it to them. I'm going to go through and make sure that I have assigned all of the parts to them. Now, I want to change the name of the anchor chart just a little bit, make it easier for them. And, you know, I'll change the date of when they can assign it or when they can see it. I might have to change that later. And make sure that I've selected my classes and I can assign it. After I've assigned all of the pieces and parts through Ed, now I can go back and push those assignments to the students through Classroom. So now out of the 5 parts that I have added to my plan here, remember, teacher's guide, that's not for students. I'm not going to push that to Google Classroom. The Get Curious video, for some reason, they don't let the videos push to Google Classroom. But the My Book and the 2 anchor charts, those can both go to Classroom. So to push them to Classroom, you'll select this open. It will pull it up. And then up here in the top right, we're going to have that hamburger, the stop sign, whatever you want to call it. And down here, we can share it directly to Google Classroom. I'm going to select which class I want to add it to. For my action, I'll create an assignment. Then I might actually change the title a little bit. I'll give some instructions if I want to. Here is where you can select different classes or multiple classes if you have multiple classes you want to assign it to. If you need to differentiate which students you assign it to. For example, those Rigby readers, say you only want to assign it to a fraction of your class. That's where you can pick which kids to assign it to. You can change the point value. You can make it ungraded. You can select a due date. You can select your topic. Now, I've already gone through and added all of the weeks of the school year. So my topic, I'm going to find the week that I'm going to be doing this. Then if I want the students to see it right away, I would click Assign. And if I want to schedule it or save it as a draft, I would click this little triangle over here and change it. Okay. For this example, I'll just go ahead and assign it. If you want to see what it looks like, you can click View. It'll pull you directly to that assignment. Or I guess it pulls you to your stream. And you can click over and you can see it. Now, I've already gone through and actually assigned several steps to this. So it's going to show up twice. So what I'm going to try doing to help keep the students organized and help their parents a little bit is to make a to-do list, which if you can post it as material, and then keep that pinned at the top of the topics so that they have a running list of the different parts that they need. Because in a whole week, there might be different pieces and parts that they're going to need. I don't want them to get overwhelmed if I can help them. So that to-do list, they can always kind of reference that. And now we'll kind of give our week schedule. So then this is how students will access it. Now the Get Curious video, I put directions in here to watch that video before our Monday class. It's an assignment in Ed. I put a reminder that they access Ed through Clever, and I told them to make sure that they turned that assignment in through Google Classroom to let me know that they've watched the video. Then when they get to the My Book story with Zach Jumps In, for directions, I just put, here's the story. Zach jumps in from the My Book. We'll be discussing it in Tuesday's Zoom call. When they click on this link, it will take them directly to the Zach Jumps In story. There is a prepare to read activity for another story that has some questions that they need to answer. So I have that direct link to there, and I reminded them, make sure that you turn in the assignment through Ed and turn in this assignment through Google Classroom so that I know that they completed it. Then later on, when we read the Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match story, I've pushed the pages of their My Book for the story directly to them. Now, remember those anchor charts that I wanted to make sure they had. You can push anchor charts directly to the students, and then this link would take them directly to this. I haven't played around with it yet, but I wonder if you could also download them as a PDF and then upload them here in Google Classroom. And that way they could just access that PDF. It might be a little bit faster. I'll have to play around with that. Remember, there's also that point of view anchor chart. So that was another anchor chart. I wanted to make sure that they had a quick and easy way to get to it if they wanted to look at it again. And then, at the end of the week, there are those weekly assessments. Now, you cannot push the weekly assessments to Google Classroom, but you can still make an assignment in Google Classroom telling them that they need to complete it. So for my directions, they need to complete the What a Character weekly assessment for week 1 in Ed. I reminded them that they access Ed through Clever. I reminded them to make sure they turn in the assignment in Ed and Google Classroom so that I know that they're finished. And that way, once they turn it in, that'll take it off of their to-do list through Classroom. Now, if you want more information about Google Classroom, maybe you're new to Google Classroom, just started using it last year. Maybe you have used it a little bit, but you want to learn even more about it. In the slideshow, I have included links to websites and articles and tutorials that will help you kind of go further with Google Classroom and learn some of the more intermediate things that you can do with it. There's really a lot you can do with Google Classroom, and there's a lot that you can tailor to exactly what you need or your students need. If you want more information about educational technology in general, I also have some links for you. I have a Padlet started with some resources about EdTech for teachers. Go ahead and check that out. There are some links to video tutorials. There's links to different apps and things like that that might help you. I have them all by categories. Take a peek at that. I have an article that I recently read about 9 ways that online teaching should be different from face-to-face. We don't want to just replicate the classroom. They are, online teaching is different from face-to-face classroom. There is a different pedagogy about how we should be approaching it. So this article is kind of a good article to make you start to think about how you can transform your teaching this year. Shake Up Learning is a wonderful website, and she always has really good resources and tutorials. Jake Miller has a podcast called EDU Duct Tape. He has some really good videos on YouTube if you like that. You can also subscribe to his emails with lots of things. Alice Keeler, I adore her. I saw her present at an EdTech conference a couple years ago. She is the queen of spreadsheets, and Google has named her the queen of spreadsheets. She is wonderful. She has tons of resources about using Google Classroom and tons of the other Google apps that everything you didn't realize that they could do. She has tons of information for you. So definitely check her out. If you haven't checked out ISTE yet, the International Society for Technology and Education, they have a wealth of knowledge about teaching online, about using EdTech, about all of these apps, about these tools, about standards for students of, what students should be able to do with technology, what teachers need to know about technology. And it's worth checking out, especially as we, as a district, are getting more and more technology, as hopefully will be one-to-one from now on. Now, I'm sure you've been wondering this whole time, how can I get my hands on these slides so I can go back and try it myself? You can access this slideshow by going to bit.ly and then HMH Classroom. It is case sensitive, so make sure you capitalize the letters that I have capitalized. When you get there, it's going to be in view only mode. Make sure you make a copy of it. Don't request edit access. What you do when this happens is you select File, make a copy, and then change the folder to your drive, my drive. That will make a copy saved in your own Google Drive. You can edit things, you can make changes. You don't have to request edit access from the presenter and get lots of emails sent to them requesting access. So I hope this presentation has been helpful for you. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. I've been using Google Classroom in my third grade classroom for years. I have used a lot of these tools and apps that we are learning about right now. So please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or want to pick my brain. And this school year, let's channel our Katniss and have just, may the odds ever be in your favor. Good luck. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that this has been helpful for you.